Hi, welcome to my studio and welcome to this next instalment of the project vlog for my current nature journaling project on the cliffs, under the cliffs and under the Undercliffs. It's all about the Undercliffs, which is a famous nature reserve that I'm lucky enough to live really close to. Now, if you haven't seen the first part of this project, you might want to go and check out that vlog first so you understand what I'm talking about, and I've linked that in the description below. Otherwise, first I want to show you this map page that I've made. It shows the 3 routes that I'm taking as a part of this project. So I live down here and I'm focusing on the wild reserve and the beach between these 2 towns. I'm going to start off today with my early May visit to the Undercliffs. I'm going through the Undercliffs again today. I'm doing the Under the Cliffs route and I'm popping up at Pinhay a little bit too. That's going to go up onto the On the Cliffs route. So I'm going to be switching from this red route here up onto the blue one and then back down along the red. So this is the early May visit to the Undercliffs. This is the, I think, 3rd one as a part of the project so far, and on this one I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be starting a little bit of the mapping process. I've got this little black book here, and this one I'm going to be doing a little bit of mapping as I go along. I'm just starting here. I'm sat on the stile here, and this is an intersection where 2 of the routes cross over. So the On the Cliffs route, that one comes from down here and goes eastwards along the track this way. The route that I'm taking starts here at the stile and goes down into the Undercliffs this way towards the south. I'm going to be mapping this as I walk along, and it's not going to be particularly to scale, but what I've done here is number the pages at the top, so I can use that numbering system to cross-reference it against my map that is to scale. That's really going to be when I'm transferring those observations back across. So I figured I'd do that for the first half of my walk today, up until I get to Pinhay and go up onto the cliffs there. So it's probably going to be a bit slow work, walking and drawing the line and writing down observations as I go. And I want to have a bit of time also to kind of sit down and relax as I get up onto Pinhay for my lunch. So that's the plan. Let's see how we get on. I'm at Goat Island and it's taken me probably an hour longer than normal just to get here. But I have done some mapping. I've done several pages here. This is the first. See, I'm writing the little directions along the way, whether the path is ascending or descending, and a few little notes about the species that I expect to be in each area. When there's something a bit more specific that I've seen, I write the date as well. And if I've got photographs that I need to look up, need to identify something, I'll put my usual photograph with a circle around it or a box around it, so that I know that I need to look that up later. I can keep on coming and filling in these pages on every trip and just keep on adding more observations, and this is going to help me to plan the main book as well. So I've got all of the observations and then I can pick and choose which ones I want to put into the main book. Because it's taken me so long to actually get this far, I'm not going to continue mapping the whole rest of the way, because otherwise I just won't get to the end destination. I'll just be in the Undercliffs all night. And then next time in the late May trip, I'll come back, I'll start here and I'll map up another section. And I should be able to keep doing this for all of the path. And as long as I keep all of my photos and observations, any that I haven't quite got to yet, I can just add these little notes in later on. The meadow's looking amazing here now. And while I'm here on Goat Island just now, I'm going to take a little look and show you some of the wonderful wildflowers that we can find here on the meadow at this time of year. Back at Seaton, my favourite lunch stop, and I've just really pressed on quite hard to get here today. I did stop to take a few photos and videos and things, but I really wanted to press on here so I could sit and have my lunch looking at this view. I've come up onto the meadow at Pinhay, and I was kind of hoping to see the cowslips, but I left it really too late. I should have gone perhaps the beginning of April. I just kind of thought that because everything else was quite late this spring, the cowslips would have been as well. But the primroses weren't, so I don't know why I thought the cowslips would be. It doesn't really matter that the cowslips aren't here though. It's still a beautiful meadow to visit. And from here you get a view across the whole of this little section of the Undercliffs right out to sea. I'm working from these two photographs today. These are the primroses and bee flies from the April visit to the Undercliffs. I've got this little circle which I'm using to delineate the area in which I want to put this drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is sketch out the primrose from the top photograph and then add the little bee fly from the bottom photograph. The bee flies were kind of everywhere at this time of year in the Undercliffs, so it's really good to represent them where I saw them on this page. Now I'm going in with a Derwent line maker in graphite, so I'm putting a fine liner drawing over the top of my sketch. And it looks very close actually to the pencil lines. And now adding in the details on the bee fly. If you want to see me do this in more detail, if you want to see me do this in real time and talk about it in a little bit more detail, I'm on Instagram live at the first Thursday of every month at 4 o'clock British time. And there's also on my Patreon a library of all the lives that I've done so far. Taking away the pencil lines and just adding in any areas that I've missed. Now I'm using Derwent Pro Colour to add a little bit of colour of the primroses, the nice yellow centres here, and I've left a little bit of yellow in the background because in this case I want to make it clear where the primrose flower is and not have it blend into the background, even though in the photographs the primroses look quite white. I'm just putting in the colours of the leaves and the stems, and now starting to actually colour in that little bee fly itself and adding in the shadow underneath the bee fly and at certain areas on the leaves and petals too. Hello, I'm back in the Undercliffs today, and it's the end of May visit this time, and I'm going to be focusing my attention today up on the Lyme Regis side of the reserve. Quite often what's been happening is I've been walking through the Seaton end, and because that end is close to home, I kind of dawdle and do a lot of my nature journaling in the first kind of half of the walk. So this time I'm starting from the other end, and I'm just going to focus my attention up this end and then loop back home. So yeah, let's go for a walk and do a bit of nature journaling, see what we can see today, and gather some observations to put into that main journal. Now May is an amazing season, it's my favourite time of year, and I really want to show you in this trip exactly why that is, particularly when you're in an environment like this. Places that I've known well just kind of look their best at this time of year. This is a little pond that's just towards Lyme Regis, very close to Lyme Regis actually here. And the last time I was here before now, I was with a nature journaling group. And it was March and kind of looked completely different. There's so much life in it right now. The flowers and the leaves and birdsong. I think May that just sprinkles a little bit of magic over everything. That's what it feels like. I often kind of think that if I could choose any time of year, if I could choose one month, that it would be this month for the rest of time, I'd definitely choose May. I wonder if you agree with me on that. What's your favourite month where you are? This is Pinhay Cliff. This is the furthest that I'm actually going to go today. So I've walked about maybe 2 or 3 miles out of Lyme Regis. And I've been round Chimney Rock, that's where we saw the pond, and then through a little section of the Undercliffs out here to Pinhay Cliff itself. This is where I'm going to stop and have lunch, between the trees there, there's a little view of Golden Cap, which is the highest point along this little stretch of the southwest coast path here. So in terms of the nature journaling today, I've seen some damselflies and the first red admiral that I've seen this year. Lots of black caps and a jay, lots of blue tits and chaffinches and all the kind of birds that you'd expect to see at this time of year. There's a chiff-chaff singing just now. And what I'm doing really is just taking down a few observations, but mostly getting photographs and footage with the camera. And that's what I'm going to use for the main nature journal. This time I'm working on this photograph of the orange-tipped butterfly that I saw down at Pinhay. And this was, I think, in the early May visit to the Undercliffs. Now this time I've already done the line work and I'm just going to be putting in the colour today. This time I've also decided that, unlike with the primrose drawing from earlier, I'm going to be filling in the background, so I'm actually putting in the area around the butterfly and the flower as well as the butterfly itself. To make it clear that this is a background, I haven't actually drawn the lines on, so I'm working just straight into the colours and keeping it kind of subtle and blurred, so that the focus of the picture is going to be on the flower and the butterfly itself. My pencils are very short. So now I need to figure out which pinks I'm going to use, deciding on the different colours that are going to make up this bright pink flower. This is a Herb Robert flower, by the way. So building up that colour very carefully and gradually. Putting in the darker colours first this time, and then layering over the top in a lighter, brighter pink. And now it's time to do the butterfly itself. So putting in the blues that you can see on its body, and then adding in some of the colour of the thorax and the abdomen. By adding some green into those white wings, it's making it clear that this is a white butterfly, but it's not going to be perfectly white, and it's not the same colour as the paper. There's always shades that you can find in white. And this butterfly is really identified by its wonderful bright orange wings. But only the male actually has this colouring. The female is all white, or almost all white, with a little bit of border around the edges. By adding in little bits of shading in brown, you really get a real feel for the ridges that are in the wing of this beautiful butterfly. Hello, this is the first trip through the beach route. So this is the route from Lyme Regis to Seaton, or perhaps the other way around, from Seaton to Lyme Regis, under the cliffs on the beach. Now, it's the first time I've done this route and it's worked out really well today because the tide is very high right now. I think the full moon was a couple of days ago, so we've got a really good spring tide just now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for a little while, wait for the tide to go out a bit more. You can see the boats are really high in the harbour behind me just now. When the tide's gone out just that little bit more, I'll be able to get started walking under the cliffs back home to Seaton. Now this is Monmouth Beach, and you can see right over there at the point of Pinhay under Ware Cliffs, the sea is kind of brushing the base of the cliffs right now. So what I'm going to have to do is kind of cool my heels here for a few hours, wait for that tide to drop. Now the tide is going to drop to a really low point today, so I know that I'll be safe walking under the cliffs and I'm not going to get cut off at any point, which is something you've really got to take into account and consider very carefully when you're doing this sort of beach walk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit on the beach for an hour or two, do a bit of nature journaling, perhaps take a swim, and just wait for that tide to go out. Okay, I've been on the beach for a couple of hours and we're just about ready. I think now the tide's gone out just about far enough to start to get towards the point. So we've got a few people on the beach here. And what tends to happen is as soon as you get round to the point over at the end there, not many people actually go round it, if any at all. So hopefully I'll be out on my own and be able to show you the real wilderness here between these two towns of Seaton and Lyme Regis. A lot of the people who come out this far along the beach are looking for fossils. You get a lot of fossils, ammonites, particularly in the cliffs here. So I'm going to take a little look as well while I wait for the tide to dip down a little bit more. Alright, I'm now up on the point and just about to kind of disappear around the corner and away from the town and where all the people are, and then we're really going on an adventure now. And this is where I kind of am right now, and you can see a lot of what I'm having to do is just hop from stone to stone here. And the tide's happily on its way out, very easy to get past now. So we've got a long way to go. I've stopped here for my first little break. I'm underneath Pinhay Warren, which is where I walked in the last video, or the last part of this video that I made for you. I'm now here watching the rock pipits. I stopped because I heard them calling and they're nesting up on the cliffs here. So I'm doing my best to try and film them, but I feel a little bit like I'm being trolled by them. They move so quickly. You can hear them and you put the camera on, but then they've moved on. I did manage to get them in the end. I think they'll make a wonderful observation to add into the journal. This is a much easier piece of beach to walk on here. The white cliffs up there is just the turn off for Pinhay, so that's where you can get up onto the Undercliffs route. So I'm actually seeing all three different routes from this point here on the beach. The Undercliffs just under the cliff there, and then Undercliffs is right at the top. I have to say I really can't complain about this as a place to go nature journaling. It's beautiful today. It's kind of, you sort of wish that you could pause it because the amount that you see is just not enough time to get it all done. Now, one of the greatest things about doing this rock hopping is when you're just kind of hopping along and then you see things like this. The whole ammonite, perhaps 70 centimetres approximately, and then there's another one here on the edge as well, still under Pinhay. Still haven't come too far really. Lyme Regis just out of view behind there, but because this is the kind of terrain that you have to walk over, it's quite slow going, especially when you keep stopping to film or to nature journal. Now I tend to avoid walking down here. It's kind of, this is where the high tide line is, just down here, and it gets really kind of slippery and wet, difficult to walk on, and the last thing I want to do is risk turning an ankle or anything out here where you barely ever see anybody. Actually, that's one of the benefits of doing so much yoga. So I do a lot of yoga. Being able to quite confidently hop from rock to rock. It's all about the core. It's all about kind of a bit of confidence and know-how and knowing which rocks to avoid. But I'm making relatively good progress, and the tide's still got such a long way to go out, so I'm making good time here. I'm just hiding under the tree here. It's really quite hot. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm red from walking. I don't think it's sunburn. I think it's mostly just exertion. It's quite hard work, you know, walking along the beach like this. So I've just taken a little bit of a rest under here. There's kind of a lot of flies around, but they're only seaweed flies, they're not biters, so I'm just going to sort of chill in the shade, have a little bit of lunch. Just behind here, when I go round here, there's a few more rocks and things to climb over, and you go off in this direction and there'll be a lovely beach there, and that's the beach that I was in earlier in this video, the one that I showed you earlier on. That is Charton Bay, and that's the perfect place to stop and get cooled off with a quick swim. This is where there's been a lot of landsliding kind of activity here, but actually the cliff is quite shallow now at this point. Charton Beach, and it's time for a swim, I think. Just out the water, and I've gathered a bit of the beach as a snack. I've met a nice chap who lives up in the Undercliffs and was talking to me about the sea cow, and I was giving a talk yesterday over in Sidmouth, which is a town a bit further along, and we were also talking about the sea cow then. So this is a fantastic beach vegetable that's edible and forageable, and it tastes like cabbage. I'm pretty sure you can cook it up as well, but it tastes pretty good raw. Just tastes like regular kind of kale, a bit broccoli-y, really nice. This is one of my favourite spots along the route because we can see the cliffs of home in that direction there, and if we look this way we can see Charton Beach, and then the cliffs going off into the distance there. That's Golden Cap and Stone Barrow to West Bay, so you can kind of see the whole walk. This is quite a tough stretch of the coast to walk actually, because although you can see the cliffs there, they're still quite far away, and this is where you start to get a bit tired. Also, it's not quite so easy to get in the sea here because of all the rocks, so you just kind of got to keep on plugging on really, and I tend to speed up quite a bit along this stretch. These are what I call the Seaton ammonite platforms. They're the ones that are closest to home for me, and I come out here fairly often to try and catch the wildlife here and spend a bit of time out. They're not very well known, they're not very well visited, so they're a good place to come if you want a bit of solitude. I reckon I've got about 2 hours now left in my walk. What I usually do is have a nice little stop here, stick my feet in a rock pool to cool down, and write a little bit in my nature journal. This is a really interesting place. I guess it must be a shipwreck, though it could have just as easily come down from the cliff top, I suppose. I'd love to know what it is, and I need to do a bit of research on it to find out. Anybody who's local knows what this is or has any ideas. In any case, I'm nearly back home at Seaton, and this is where I'm going to stop recording for this particular part of the vlog. So I'm going to walk the rest of the way home. I plan to get back in the studio tomorrow and just get a little bit more done in the journal after a day outside. I think it'll be time to do a bit of colouring. Today I'm working on this beautiful whitethroat. I'm working from the photograph, and I've already done line work yet again. I'm just going to show you a little bit of how I add the colour to the feathers. Building up feathers using coloured pencil is one of my favourite ways to use them. And you can get so much life in a picture of a bird like this by just gradually building up the layers. There's a mixture of various greys, blues, browns and yellows to create this crest on the whitethroat's head. And similarly with the eye, going in first with a kind of brownish colour and then with a burnt umber, and then taking some time to put in some of the details around that eye. But you really get the life in the eye when you put in the black, and with coloured pencil I like to use quite a bit of black. That's why my coloured pencil is so short. Now underneath the beak, putting in some of the colours on that white patch. Now I can't leave it just white, so we're putting in a little bit of a sepia colour and some tan yellow. Building up the feathers in the neck, that's one of my favourite parts. And in the photograph that I use as a reference, you can really see these feathers in a lot of detail. So I'm building that in by using burnt umber to make little marks to denote the edges of the feathers. It's really fun to do this area under the breast because there's so many colours in there. We've got kind of an olivey colour, we've got Payne's grey, burnt umber, and of various different shades of brown and yellow. I tend to go back over areas quite a lot of the picture, adding in further details as I go along, and particularly I quite like to get my pencil sharper and sharper and sharper as time goes on, so put the sharpest, most defined details in last. You can see me here going over areas that look like I'd already done with a sharper pencil to really pick out those details. I'm doing a similar thing here on the wing, and again over the top of the bird's back. I can also pick out details using this rubber, and this is a bullet eraser by Derwent. A few more details on the tail. Again, using colours that I've already used elsewhere in the bird to kind of pull all of the picture together. I do a similar thing here for the leg, trying to keep a kind of cohesion in all the colours that are being used within the drawing overall. I like to put the shading in underneath first, so breaking out all of the areas on the fawn where I can see that there's some shade, and putting that in first with either a brown or a black colouring pencil. This is a nice way to finish off the picture, because once you've got the shaded areas in, you can decide just how much detail you really need. And here's the bird finished off. One of my favourite bits of work in the new journal so far. Thank you so much for watching this project vlog. I'm going to be back in the autumn with another one of these where I'll take you through all of the progress on the project through the summer. If you haven't yet seen the first instalment of this, where I introduced the project, you want to click on that video link right there, and when it's uploaded I'll be putting the next instalment down in this bottom corner. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my Patreons for supporting me and allowing me to keep on making this kind of video. Thank you so much for your support. I'll see you next time.